How's that?
That's perfect.
Great. So, mysticism is the topic. We, as Baha'is, are all mystics. There's no way around it. You can't really be a mystic. A mystic is someone who believes in the unseen, believes in the reality of the unseen, the unsensible. Second surah of the Quran begins. This is a book about which there is no doubt. It's for those who believe in the unseen. You can capitalize the word unseen, because it's a sacred unseen. As Abdul Baha says, reality is invisible. Right?
Yes.
Reality is invisible. What we have here is very beautiful, without question. But it doesn't quite make it to the level of reality. That's what we are trying to do. Human beings are trying to be in touch with the real. So to help us do this, Baha'u'llah has given us a number of pointers and clues, and the most eloquent in the current context, in my opinion, for the time being, remember, conclusion is a place where you get tired of thinking. Right? For the time being, the idea is that the short obligatory prayer tells it like it is for us as Baha'i mystics. We were created to know God and to, well, let's translate it to know thee and to worship thee in English. But that word that is in the original Arabic, it could easily be understood as love. All right? It's ibadah, and it means service or slavery or deep worship. These are words that the poets use to speak about their beloved. And so it is to know, which is there are many words for know in Arabic, and this is one that's very dear to the hearts of Baha'is, it's irfan. And it actually means to know and to recognize something that you had known long ago and maybe had forgotten. So love and knowledge are the items, the forces or the domains and the dimensions of our life, which means that we're all mystics. Name me someone who's not a mystic, and I'll go out and say a prayer for them. So there's nothing really to prove here, except I will give you the final exam now. At the end of the session, the school, the meeting, I would like you to come up with something that's not mystical about Baha'i teaching, Baha'i faith, the Baha'i community. Let me know if you discover something. All right? And in that mystical vein, as you know, and we'll encounter this again, I think, if we have the time. I mean, I have so much stuff here to share with you. But, Abdul Baha, talking about the covenant and the commenting on hidden words, Persian 19, and related hidden words about beneath the tree of life, where we all met. This is one of the things that we have to remember in the course of our lives. This is one of the points of the short obligatory prayer. We've been created to know thee, to recognize you, to recognize, in a sense, all of us from that moment beneath the tree. And in his commentary on this incredible hidden word, which has a deep connection to Islam, as we all know. Abdu'l-Baha says that past, present, and future are illusions. These are things that have been given to us to help us deal with life. But in the mind of God, they don't exist. And there's a quotation which is interesting, and you could call this a mystical point of view, I suppose, but it's said with such adamantine certitude by Abdu'l-Baha, and it is confirmed in our daily sort of experience in our life and the refuge that we take with the prayers and with the writings, that we know that this is utter truth. So it attains the level of some kind of scientific truth. It is indisputable that time is an illusion. And as a matter of fact, I think our resident physicist would tell us that even the scientists will go along with this. So this is where it becomes difficult to distinguish the mystical from whatever over time people have, in order to protect themselves from the mystical, have tried to construe its opposite. The term mystical has caused a lot of problems in history, and it's frequently used as sort of a derogatory mode of dismissal, right? So we don't find the word that often in the Baha'i writings. Guardian uses it a lot to translate a number of different things, interestingly enough. In the Kitab-i-Gan, for example, the word mystic occurs numerous times, and he uses it to translate the word divine, to translate the word spiritual, to translate, but he wants us to learn about this word and what it means. So what does the word mean itself? It comes from a Greek root, mayan, which there's naturally some conversation about, since it's a word, and people like to talk about words, with words. It means to close the eyes or to close the mouth, and it's been understood to describe that which happens in the process of being initiated into a small group, a cult, or in the Greek environment. So that it was generally understood that it means you can't say what went on in here, you can't tell the others because they haven't done whatever is necessary, frequently pay the money, right? But they haven't done whatever is necessary in order to gain the privilege of hearing what you've heard and knowing who the leader is sometimes, because sometimes these groups had political sort of implications, so they wanted to protect the leader, and so there's that aspect to what the meaning of the word mystic. Eyes closed, mouth closed. For Baha'is, the word can be construed in a different way, because we're told the opposite. We don't not tell people what we've experienced. We tell people what we've experienced. That's part of the program. That's part of being a Baha'i. But nonetheless, we're mystics, and our mouths are closed, and our eyes, in a sense, are blinded because the experience is too ineffable to speak about. And that is symbolized in the, if you like, the theological presuppositions of Baha'i revelation, that God is completely unknowable. To try for an eternity of eternities, we cannot get one hair's breadth closer to understanding what the essence of God is, if that's not being blind and dumb, I don't know what is. We're simply helpless. And at the same time, there's no doubt that this is a reality. This is a particular type of theology that's not exclusive to Baha'i teaching. It was, in fact, spread around the world through the Quran and the preaching of Muhammad. Quran has a similar type of, if you like, theological notion about God and what she is and how it communicates and what he does. No one knows. And the Quran is also adamant that you will never know what God is, ever. So there is this inability to speak built into the revelation. It's a paradox, or if you like, a coincidence of oppositions. There's all this language that flows out of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and it electrifies our lives. But at the same time, there's this sense of failure that comes along with it. That's the cloud of glory that language trails. Yeah. That is the ultimate. And also paradoxically, that failure is somehow a success, because it very mysteriously or mystically energizes us. It is inspiring in a very unusual kind of way. Yeah. So that's the range of meanings for the word mystic. And repeat, if you see anybody who's not a mystic, let us know. In the name of God, the clement, the merciful, praise be to God who hath made being to come forth from nothingness. Graven upon the tablet of man the secrets of pre-existence. Taught him from the mysteries of divine utterance that which he knew not. Made him a luminous book unto those who believed and surrendered themselves. Caused him to witness the creation of all things. Crochet. In this black and ruinous age. And speak forth from the apex of eternity with a wondrous voice in the excellent temple, to the end that every man may testify in himself, by himself, in the station of the manifestation of his Lord, that verily there is no God save him, and that every man may thereby win his way to the summit of realities, until none shall contemplate anything whatsoever but that he shall see God therein. It's the opening of the Seven Valleys. It's the older translation. There's a new translation, which is very beautiful. Now, the works of Baha'u'llah, another somewhat paradoxical occurrence, are so simultaneously deeply and supremely mystical, and at the same time equally concerned with what we're generally accustomed to viewing as that which is the opposite of the mystical. That is to say, daily, mundane life, war and peace, economics, gender equality, education. All of these things have acquired the, at least in Western society, have acquired the characterization of being secular concerns. Right? Now, this is really as Baha'u'llah teaches us, this is a major error in the way, in our consciousness and how we think about things. The idea of the secular is, in a Baha'i context, frankly laughable. Because there is nothing that is the opposite of spiritual or mystical. What we perceive as being not the spirit is, as we know from the beautiful work of a man I had admired for a long time, and who's been a great encouragement to me in my work, who's going to be speaking to you a little later today, who has demonstrated in his many beautiful talks and writings that it's illusory. These things that we see here are really spirit crystallized. That the material world is not the opposite of the spiritual world. The material world is a consequence of the activity of the spiritual energy with which we are all surrounded at all times. And we have, in early Islamic intellectual history, we have people who spoke about this in philosophical terms, and they because it made sense out of Islam, out of the idea that God is unknowable, yet there's this connection. That one of the great thinkers who was killed for being a great thinker in the late 12th century, the name you may know, Sohrawardi, formulated a beautiful theory of how everything is light, which is not really in the metaphorical sense. It was a light, but it was a special kind of light, which begins as an unseeable, unsensible light, and which through various stages, arranged in a hierarchical range, from top to bottom, descends, and we see something like a lump of coal. We're tempted to think, oh, this is the complete opposite, or dirt, or a swamp, or mud. This is the utter opposite. No, this is the wrong way, he said. What that is light, but it's light that is at such a low energetic level, is moving at such a slow speed that it has congealed into tangible, workable, touchable matter. This is a very beautiful way of looking at things. So we are all light, whether we can see it or not. Yeah. And everything is light. And part of the prayer, the short obligatory prayer, created me to know you and to worship you, is acquiring the experience to be able to see the light shining through everything. If you like, to see the transparency of our world, to look through things. And we'll find out when we're talking about Islam. It's one of the Quranic teachings. Is so important to Islam, but even more important in some ways, I'm tempted to say, to the Baha'i faith, is this theory of signs, divine signs. Yes, the ayah, or the alam, these signs that are everywhere, and these signs are divine. And we'll return to it. We're going to go through some of these passages in the Quran. This deep connection between Baha'u'llah's vision, the Bob's vision, and what we confidently call Islam as if it's something else, is an area of study that was very dear to the guardian's heart, as you know. He encouraged the Baha'is to study Islam. And it's interesting to know in what context that his most emphatic message on this came. It was him telling people in North America how to teach the faith. And among the other things that you should do is study Islam. Study the Quran. Study the conditions of the society out of which the Bab's message arose. Study the way in which the Bab presented himself. What sort of terminology did he use? This all comes from Islamic culture and Islamic religion and Muhammad's religion. Muhammad, the manifestation of God, religion and experience, which was mystical in the first instance, as you know. You know this, well, we'll return to it. But before I go any further, and I'm probably out of time already. Okay, Antuka. So, and we all know that, one of the reasons that I became interested in Islamic studies was because I was deeply touched and moved by the love with which Baha'u'llah referred to the Quran and to Muhammad and to the Imams. And this seemed to me, at the same time, of course, all the beloved friends were telling me this: Baha'i faith is not Islamic. Baha'i faith is not Islamic. It's not Islamic. And don't forget, it's not Islamic. By the way. And so this seemed to set up a kind of cognitive dissonance in what passes for my brain, and we began to look into it, and but because of this deep relationship between Islam and Baha'i teaching and the Baha'i revelation, we have a prayer from Baha'u'llah that goes like this: He is God, exalted be He, the Lord of majesty and power. I plead my grief and sorrow unto God, the Lord of all mankind. The affairs of men have been shaken, the nations have become perturbed, and Islam has been weakened thereby. The enemies have afflicted it from all sides, and it remains encompassed by them. Thus it behooveth the people of God to invoke him in the morning and the night season, to beseech him to graciously aid the Muslims, one and all, to do that which is pleasing and seemly, to exalt them by his command, and through the power of his sovereign might, to make them aware of that which will exalt their stations, to change their abasement into might, their poverty into wealth, their destruction into advancement, their distress into peace of mind, and their fear into security and tranquility. Verily, he is the all-merciful. There is none other God but him, the compassionate, the bountiful. I happen to have some extra copies of that. If you want to take them.
What's the
I only have 3.
citation?
I don't know. It's online. It's recently translated. I think by OB. It's, I think it's technically in that classification provisional, but it's there. And no one doubts that it was written and revealed by Baha'u'llah.
I think the International Baha'i Community published it online, right?
Yes, exactly, yeah, in a compilation on Islam. That's right. So maybe it is not even provisional anymore. Well, Baha'u'llah's concern with the mystical and his concern with the world is not a bifurcated attention or consciousness. He clearly sees them as one thing. That this idea of unity emerges here. And again, this unity is something which, if we know anything at all about Islam, we know that Islam is concerned with unity. But Baha'u'llah's revelation and the Bab's revelation help us understand the notion of unity, because monotheism has been a very dangerous thing in the world. Yeah. And it's not something that we all love to celebrate every chance we get, because we've seen all of the harm that has come out of monotheism, in which the oneness and the singleness become a symbol of triumph and oppression or law or authority. A unity that is wielded against those who do not consider themselves to be a part of it. It's an emblem of victory and a mode of marginalizing those who are not on the winning team. This has happened in the history of religion, and it's happening today in the working out of so-called religion. Well, religion is a difficult word anyway, isn't it? You know? I heard something on television a couple of weeks, years ago, I guess. Time, right? Religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell.
Oh.
Right. Spirituality is for people who've been there. Right? So in any case, there's something in that, I think. What Baha'u'llah tells us is that unity is not an instrument of power or power tripping or taking advantage of the weak or even dividing up humanity, because the unity is so firmly wired into the Baha'i teachings as a result of the Islamic iteration of the idea of unity. There's no Muslim on the face of the earth that would not agree that there's one God, there's one humanity, and there's one religion. No, none. They may not have articulated it this way in the history of them presenting or knowing who they are. This is something that has come about and is associated with the Baha'i faith as an emblem of its identity. But this is equally applicable to at least the preaching of the Quran and of Muhammad, and of the way many thousands and millions of Muslims have seen themselves in the world. One humanity, one God, and one religion. But clearly there is not oneness. We'll see more. But what there is, and what Baha'u'llah insists upon telling us, and this is also, again, a mystical apperception, because we don't see it instantly or immediately, but he gives us a faith that absolutely every created thing, and The Guardian is such a genius at translation. This word "all things" occurs a lot in the writings in Arabic and in Persian, and the Guardian frequently adds the modifier "created." In Arabic, it will just say "all things," right? Kul shay. But the Guardian always, or you can never say always, right? But the Guardian adds "created," all created things, for a very good reason, from the point of view of Islamic thought and Baha'i thought, which says that this unknowable God is infinitely and eternally unknowable. Every created thing means, and it's another way of saying everything other than the divine essence. Right? Everything, which is everything. Everything that we experience. So the Baha'i teachings insist and make understandable for us in a very beautiful and very simple, clear water way that what this unity means, because they're not all the same. It means that they're all deeply connected. Everything is deeply connected. And this we can study. This we can come to some kind of terms with. The mysteries of this connection are revealed to us as time goes by, as we work, and whatever work we do. In fact, I want to talk a little bit about art and the idea of art, the English word art and the way it's understood in today's world, which means creativity, painting and literature and all of these things. But music especially is particularly eloquent, I think, when talking about mysticism. Art is one of the sciences, if you like, one of the ways in which interconnections otherwise not seen are brought to our consciousness. And it's a revelation. It's not necessarily the most great revelation, but it's a pretty good one. and I think that we should allow ourselves to relax in the face of these multiple revelations that are going on around us. Thank God there's only one that's been given the responsibility of revealing the absolute truth, so we don't have to worry about that. That's taken care of. But it means that the rest of us can experiment, and we can look into it, and we can try and reveal for ourselves and then others these beautiful connections that electrify our existence and our lives and our connections with people. Baha'u'llah, it seems to me, one point of view, never spoke about anything else. That this is what he's talking about, whether it's talking about understanding history, because, the unities, it's not stated explicitly, the unity of God, the unity of religion, the unity of humanity. Seems like we could easily have added the unity of time and history. There's no, time, history is not dead. It's not even in the past. It's all around us all the time. It's going on in our minds and our hearts, and the way we relate to people, as Abdu'l-Baha said. Past, present, and future, just like Einstein said. Past, present, future are stubborn illusions. Abdu'l-Baha said it a little before Einstein said it. But this is a very important thing. And it seems to me that the revelation of Baha'u'llah wants to make this known to humanity. And the idea that the more people who know this, the better it will be, the better we will treat each other, the better governments will run. So it's, and on and on. And so it is, in a sense, the mystical orientation. If you want to use that word, I mean, it doesn't bother me that much, but I know in some circles, there's an allergy to the word mystical, right? You know, look how often it's used in the writings, and you can cure the allergy, right? It's everywhere when you start counting it. I mean, that would make an interesting sort of study, is to compare the way in which the Guardian translated all these words as mystic or mystical. I mean, that would make an interesting paper. Maybe it exists already, I just don't know about it. But it is this mystical viewpoint that is essential for life, because it is the forces of life that it actually tracks. When we are asked, when we are acknowledged that we are created to know and love God, we are put in a process whereby these two words, it's not accidental that they've been put together, or know and worship, but remember, worship and serve are synonyms for love. So to know and to love works like this. In our lives we know this. We haven't maybe read this as a recipe for being, but we experience in our lives that somehow the more we love, the more we know. And vice versa, the more we know, the more we love. And they are mutually sort of some kind of spiritual symbiosis. They cross-fertilize each other. Knowledge and love are inseparable. And this is nothing but perennial mysticism. This is, and Baha'u'llah is universalizing it for the entire human race. This is what the Gnostics were on about. This is what the saints of the church were on about. This is what the Sufis were on about. And now Baha'u'llah is insisting that it is a normal human activity. That we can talk about it in public. That it's not a private thing. It's not indecent. It's part of who we are. It is something, in fact, that we must talk about and know about. Now, we don't have, obviously, we don't want to beat each other over the heads with it and so on, but we make it a part of our concerns. Yes, other things are important too, but the spirit that is inflamed by a contemplation of the mystical nature of reality is sui generis. There's nothing like it. This is what we feel in the feast. You know, when the words are spoken or chanted, when the revelation is read. This was trackable from my very first experience as a Baha'i back in 1968 BC. When we go to the feast, and when the writings were read, the atmosphere changed. We all felt this. And it's not an illusion. It's something that in the future there will be an app you can use, I suppose, to record that change in atmosphere, but we don't have one yet. But it is palpable and real and material. It changes things. It's not a hallucination. This is the power of the Holy Spirit, the divine, the electric energy of the mystical dimension of our lives. It's simply irrefutable. Baha'u'llah wrote numerous works, the hidden words, to the seven valleys, to the Kitab-i-Iqan, which is incredibly mystical, beautiful, and the translation of the Guardian is, we say we don't have miracles in the Baha'i faith. I consider the translation of Shogi Effendi to be miraculous. Yeah. I mean, they're just unbelievable. The way his use of the English language to bring out the meanings of these words. All these writings are utterly mystical. They are simultaneously part of the Islamic mystical Irfani tradition, and they distinguish themselves from that tradition in very interesting and important ways. And again, one of the really exciting and interesting ways it happens is the audience, which Baha'u'llah defines for himself, which is the entire planet. This is a very courageous, very powerful gesture. But this transforms the way we look at history and the world. There are a number of synonyms in the writings and in for love and knowledge, all of which are very important in thinking about and working out. We can express the excitement, the joy, the encounter with the deepest, most mysterious, deep down energy of life, but we still are encouraged to learn about it and to try and become, even if we will ultimately be speechless about aspects of it, there's a lot of space between where we are now and speechlessness. So we as Baha'is, as believers in the vision and teachings of Baha'u'llah, have a responsibility to educate ourselves about the dynamics of the relationship between love and knowledge. And one way of doing that is to precisely look in the writings and find these other words that all right. Scriptural logic says that there's no such thing as a synonym, right? That God, whatever scripture it happens to be, that each word is distinct for a reason. And if we don't see it right away, that's not the fault of the language, that's our lack of understanding or experience. So yes, we have two words for love, kind of, in Arabic, many more, but we need to think about what is the precise difference. We were having a conversation on the way here with Marjan and Jason and James from San Francisco. They very kindly gave Barbara and me a lift. Had this, that was about a 5-hour drive, I think. But we had terrific conversations in the car, and we're talking about the revelation. The Baha'i revelation is now, in Islam, the revelation, the Quran was considered untranslatable, that it didn't have divine power in any other language but Arabic. One of the really revolutionary things that's happened in the Baha'i faith is that this no longer holds true. This is not the case anymore. that the revelation may be translated, is encouraged to be translated, and it is effective in whatever language it has been translated into. Yeah. This is kind of a minor miracle, really. And this is part of the program of universalization and dramatization of this idea of the interconnectedness of all things, right? Right, because I mean, if we but nonetheless, there are differences between languages, and each language has its own genius. And one of the geniuses of the Arabic language is that it is able to articulate very fine differences of meaning and intention, more so than off the bat, say, English. Poets can arrange words to come to similar kind of effect. So, but the structure of the Arabic language is built in. It's already sort of a polished, simultaneous instrument and music, right? So, and the way in which meaning is expressed in Arabic kills everybody. You know, I mean, even people who wouldn't believe in God if you held a gun to their head are paralyzed when they hear the Arabic being chanted, of the Quran especially. Yeah. It's something, you know, phenomenal. And part of that is because of the way in which Arabic generates meaning. It's a bit like, you know, in some cultures, the musical scales have shorter intervals between the notes, right? In European music, we have whole tones and half tones, but in some cultures, there are like minute tones that, you know, I can't even hear, but they're there, right? It's a little bit like that with the Arabic language. So that's great. So we learn from each other. So the languages learn from each other, and we keep at it. But one of the ways we do is by tracking synonyms for love. We have beauty as a synonym for love in the Baha'i faith. And this is, whenever you see the word beauty, it's a sign of love or an instance of love. There are Arabic words like ishq, which that's the word that Abdul Baha uses when he talks about the magnetic power that keeps the planets in orbit. This word is ishq, which actually means yearning love, magnetic love. I can't tear myself away from you, love, kind of thing. Then there's mahabba, but there are other words like mawadda and words such as guardianship, walaya, which the core of that word is nothing but love. That's absolute love. And this doesn't come through in the word guardian,
No.
right? Automatically. But it's unmistakable in the Arabic word. You can't read it without thinking of love. You know, it's just the way it is. So we're instructed to look at these vocables, these so-called synonyms, and contemplate them. And this is very important, for, as the Guardian indicated in that letter he gave to the Baha'is of North America on Christmas Day in 1939, that we should study Islam in order to teach the faith, right? This is one of the things that I think he wanted us to become familiar with and to understand. Come on. Oh boy. It's the same with knowledge. Right? We have in the Baha'i scriptural corpus, the vast corpus that it is, there are a number of words for knowledge. There's knowledge, there's recognition, there is understanding, there is perspicuity, there's insight. All of these things, they resonate with each other like like the tones in a triad, they make beautiful music together, but they ain't the same.
No.
They are different, and they're different for a purpose. Otherwise, the revelation would have been just one word, right? Just one word. And it's not. Especially not in the case of the Todd, right? And his follower and ultimate promised one, Baha'u'llah. The language that flows forth in it is like a waterfall. And it's differentiated. So this is just a meditation that I wanted to share with you, that it's worthwhile to get at the mystical dimension of the Baha'i faith, to look at some of this language and to see where it leads us. Now, I mentioned the Baha'i, and let's see if there's too many things we have here. We will return to a couple of the writings of Baha'u'llah in the last lecture. Let's introduce the writings of the Baha'i. Well, now we are accustomed to thinking of the revelation of the Baha'i as beginning with, on that night of the interview with Mullah Hussein. It's such a beautiful scenario told in the Dawnbreaker. It gets more beautiful every time I read it. And I love it. But even in that story, Mullah Hussein sees another book that was written by the Baha'i on the shelf. Right? And, Mullah Hussein is there having tea with the Baha'i, and he's sort of snooping around. And everybody looks at other people's books on the shelf. And these people are no different. And he says, and he opens it up and flips through it, and he says to Ali Muhammad Shirazi, the merchant in Shiraz, "What's this? This person's talking about the esoteric of the exoteric, and the esoteric of the esoteric, and what is all this about?" Don't pay any attention to that. Some stuff by a beginner. It's just sort of an amateur, right? Don't worry about it. And then they continued their conversation, and you know the story, of course. And it came time for the moment, and the Bab began revealing, in the disguise of a Quran commentary, the Qayyum al-Asma, which was, and he wrote the entire first chapter. There's 111 chapters. He wrote the first one there that evening in the presence of Mullah Hussein, the result of which caused Mullah Hussein to recognize the Bab and to become the first one to believe in him. And became, as Baha'u'llah characterizes, the one without whom God would not have been established on his throne. That's Mullah Hussein. Right? The one without whom God would not have been established on his throne. Now, what did Mullah Hussein do that was so important? Well, he understood. That's what he did. He understood what the Bab would say. That means that, in the old philosophical game of if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody to hear, it doesn't make any sound. This indicates that the answer to that question is no. Right? That in order for the revelation to occur, there has to be a receiver. There has to be something to register it, to hear it. Otherwise it doesn't exist. It's another symbiotic kind of situation, right? It's a very beautiful, thrilling kind of area of meditation and thought. But that book that the Bob sort of discouraged Mullah Hussein from paying any attention to was actually written by the Bob. Bob was being very humble at the time. You know, leave it alone. It's not worth your trouble. Well, why? Well, maybe one of the reasons too is Mullah Hussein was a monster scholar. I mean, he was really heavily educated, deeply learned. He was not that old, in his early 30s, I think, but he had already been sent out on these missions by Sayyid Kazem to sort of convince the Grand Mufti of here and the Sheikh of there, and to convince them of the truth of Kazem Rashdi's teaching curriculum, because that group had come under some kind of a program and by the so-called orthodoxy. So Mullah Hussein was something of a genius and something of an extremely accomplished scholar. And many people were devoted to him as well, because he was so powerful and he was so eloquent and accomplished and knowledgeable. And I don't know exactly, but that's who the Bab was having to tea then, at this sort of, not quite, maybe not a sheikh, like really well-known, but someone whom the Bab had known actually in Karbala. They had met before. And the Bab knew what kind of abilities Mullah Hussein had. And on this night, Mullah Hussein learned what kind of abilities the Bab had. And this was an extremely powerful evening. But that book, to return to it, is the subject of the book that was mentioned in the very kind introduction by David Langness through Shiva, called the Tafsir, which is, you know, the word Tafsir means Quran commentary. Tafsir as mystical experience. That book that Mullah Hussein found on the shelf is the subject of my book on it. And it's a commentary on the first two surahs of the Quran. And it is so hot with the love of the Prophet and the Imams and the Quran, which is in this atmosphere, this highly charged spiritual, mystical atmosphere of the the alchemy of the bringing together of love and knowledge. The Quran and the people who are revealing it sometimes experience role reversal. So that the language is the person and the person is the language. The Prophet in the very earliest period was considered the Quran as a human being, for example. It's an embodied Quran, walking amongst the believers. And this was bequeathed down through history to the Imams. And on the other side, in frequently Sunni Islam, the Sufi sheikhs acquired this similar kind of charisma, that there's no difference between the words being said and the person, that they are in a kind of permanent, they're one thing. Right? But this work that the Bab did is really a kind of a extended concerto of the ideas of the productive energy of love and knowledge in this early work. And the central feature of that work is precisely the word that I mentioned earlier that is translated in our writings as guardianship. And in Arabic, it's walaya or wilaya. And in Persian, it's vilayat or valaya or valayat. It means a number of things simultaneously, right? So that it's a very powerful word, and it's kind of at the core of the mystical culture of Islam, whether Shi'i or Sunni. It is the Walaya is sort of the abstract noun, meaning love. It does mean guardianship, but it means a lot of other things too. Loyalty, absolute love, faithfulness. That's the noun. And then the active participle, the agent of this, is called a wali. As you know, the guardian is called the Wali Amrullah.
Yeah.
Right? The wali, the bearer of walaya for the cause of God. Wali Amrullah. Right? This word wali or wali in Arabic has often been translated by the dreaded Orientalists as saint. Saint, right. But the word saint is misleading because in Islam, number one, sanctity was never contingent upon being not being married, right? It never had anything to do with that. Whereas the word saint in Syriac Christianity actually means celibacy, right? In Islam, the idea of a saint had nothing to do with this at all. So saint can be a little misleading. A better way that brings out the spiritual identity of this word is friend, frankly.
Friend?
Friend, yes. The idea, because the wali is a friend of God.
Oh.
And by extension, the friend to God's creation. So this is a more accurate translation, but it'll be several generations before people start actually translating it this way, because the idea of saint has been so burned into the discourse. Yeah. But that's what it is. Okay, good. Yeah. I don't want to go over time because I'm looking forward to the next speaker. So in this work of the Baha'is, is called the commentary on the Surah of the Cow, the Baha'i says that he opens it with an introduction that's not, he doesn't get right to work. He has a kind of opening doxology, you know, praise be to God, a long litany of very beautiful language, praising God as the creator of the heavens and the earth, and the family of the Prophet Muhammad as the bearers of the love and truth of God, and on and on. And at the end of that, he says, I began this work when I heard the news of the death of my beloved teacher, Sayyid Kazem Rashid. And how did I hear about this? The Holy Land, which in the Bab's language means Karbala, which is where many of the important imams are buried, and is a site of pilgrimage, and people used to take their dead there to be buried. They've traveled thousands of miles at great expense to bury their loved ones in the vicinity of this holy land, Karbala. It doesn't mean Jerusalem, it means Karbala. It's the same word that is used, Arz Muqaddas. The entire Holy Land rose up, a bit like a pixelated hologram, rose up into the air and traveled from there to Shiraz and descended in front of my house with the information that my beloved teacher had passed on. Yes. Now, it's a very moving and beautiful mystical experience. And for the last several months I've been thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to begin all of this? I was going to begin by talking about there are different types of mysticism. It's good to think about that. It's not all one thing. There are different ways of being mystical. This is one type, right? And then there are other types as well, which I think we'll get to some of them. This is one. This is a very dramatic, visionary, sort of almost cinematic type of mystical experience that the Bab is quite happy to share with us that he had. It wasn't necessarily that uncommon in his culture. This was not something that people were sort of chased out of town for having been seen having or whatever. This was part of the language of the culture, of the spiritual language. And as we know, the Bab had several other very powerful, visionary, spiritual experiences, almost around the same time, in fact. But let's go back to this one. So he said, then I in that moment, this powerful vision that came to me, I therefore decided to begin this work. As a side bit of information, the Sheikhs, Sheikh Ahmad Asai and Sayyid Kazem, were also massive intellects and very prolific scholars, an enormous amount of very compelling, beautiful work, in which precisely the mystical and the, for lack of a better word, the rational or reasonable, anyway, are blended in a way that is extremely persuasive and eloquent. And you know they were extremely popular in Iran. The Sheikhs were, and they were sort of the sign of modernity. Now we can still be Muslim, and we can be Shiite, we can love the Imams, but we can know why we love them, and we don't have to be embarrassed, because we don't have to can think of ourselves as being traditional and superstitious and all the rest, because Sheikh Ahmad was a philosopher, and he explained everything in utter rationalistic detail to his satisfaction and to the satisfaction of his audience. And Sayyid Kazem was the same, only much more artistic in a way. Sayyid Kazem, his use of language is sometimes a little more difficult, but very, very beautiful and powerful, and stretches the mind in all kinds of directions. The Bab said, I'm dedicating this work, this commentary on the Quran, to him. And I think he did this because of all the books that the Sheikhs wrote, they didn't produce what normal schools of Islamic thought would produce, an entire commentary on the Quran. I think the Bab had taken it upon himself to fill in the gap here. This is my theory, I can't really prove it. But he didn't get very far because he was interrupted by another vision, which we'll get to in a second. But this work, this commentary on the Surah of the Cow and the Surah of the opening, is extremely beautiful, and it's also very much a part of the contemporary language and the mode of doing Quran commentary, with the Bab's own particular personality obvious here and there. Why I'm taking the time to explain this to you is because what Mullah Hussein encountered on the night of the 23rd of May in 1844, and what led to his great recognition of the Baba 2 hours and 11 minutes after sunset on that night, is that work that he wrote for Mullah Hussein is utterly different. Completely, in a style that had never been seen before, in a language that had never really existed before. He created this whole new discourse about the spiritual reality of existence and what was happening right now at that time in Shiraz, what was going on in the spiritual realm. But if you were to compare the two books, the other one, the first one, was written at most 3 months before that date. But it's like two different people. It really is. You wouldn't in a million years guess ever that this book was written by that person. Because instead of being sort of following the rules of Quran commentary with this means that, and here are my sources, and here are the references, and this Imam said that, that's why I can support this. In the Qayyim al-Asma, it's comparable to really a jazz interpretation. It's like Charlie Parker playing High, High the Moon. It's everything is in there, all the elements are there, but they are rearranged in such a masterful way, and he's not that old, right? Yeah. It's rearranged in such a masterful way that you simply bow to it. You know, even if you quibble about some of the liberties, but he breaks all the rules. You know? Whereas in the first work, he's following the rules. And that's the beginning of the new dispensation. I think that's enough.
Thank you.